Hey, fellas, thanks for being with me today. I just want to take some time, just right off the bat here, for the dads to get to know you guys real quick. So, Joel, give me your 30-second pitch, man. Tell me who you are.
Sure. So I'm Joel Hallbaker. I live in North Central Alabama. I'm divorced and remarried. I've got two girls from my first marriage. They are now 15 and almost 13. And I've been remarried for about 5.5 years. My day job is as a high school history teacher. And outside of that, I work with a lot of blended families doing coaching. I'm also an author and a professional speaker.
Nice. All right, Kevin, tell us about you, brother.
I am Kevin. I have a business called Kevin Colby Media and focus on video marketing. Love working with small businesses and nonprofits. Married to a beautiful wife who's way smarter than me. Been married 27 years. I think that's right. I'll check it for the next one. 3 kids. Including our youngest who has special needs, which has completely opened up the world to us, and we'll be launching some projects on that. Live in Raleigh, North Carolina, originally from Nashville, Tennessee, and I have good hair.
Yes, you did. Dude, I didn't realize you were originally from Nashville.
Yeah,
Nice.
born and raised.
Cool. John Boy, John Ball, tell us a little bit, brother.
My name is John Ball. I live in Sandy, Oregon. I've been divorced twice, have kids from both of them, and I'm remarried. We've been married now 21 years. We've got a blended family. I was a single dad. I got custody of my kids, single dad of 4. She was a single mom of 2, and we put it together. And through our wounds, we're coming out the other side. It's looking really good. God is good. And through that process of going through the wounds, it's just opened up an incredible passion for me for broken men and broken families.
Love it, dude. Now, and you are retired, let me say this right, hunting and fishing guide and outfitter, right?
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, I've been a fishing guide in Oregon for eons, and then we had a hunting outfit in Wyoming for over 13 years, and very, very blessed. And now I'm just putting my focus on just what God wants. So
Very cool. So this month, I guess we should say, the topic is the idea that we're kind of coming around and having this conversation about is you are not alone. I know in my own life, this idea really overwhelmed me and has overwhelmed me at times, whether it was in business or personal life, whatever. Many years ago, as God started kind of doing his thing in me, I had thought I was the only one struggling with this idea of a father wound and this abandonment and all the stuff that I was dealing with my dad. And, to that point, it really, I was obsessed, literally thinking that everybody else had this father thing figured out. Everybody else had this man thing, this husband thing, all these things figured out. And I thought I was the only one struggling with it and that I was all alone. Joel, how has that idea kind of impacted your life and how did you get through it?
For me, when I think of not being alone, I think of 2 specific moments in my life. One was when I went through divorce, and the other one was actually sort of a series of moments after I lost my dad about 11 and a half years ago. So when I went through divorce, my parents had divorced when I was in middle school, so I knew that was a thing that happened. But when they went through it, I remember thinking I just became a statistic. And I didn't know what it was like to be from a divorced home. I had like one friend that I went to school with whose parents weren't together. Everybody else, they were still together. And so I remember thinking this is really strange. And when I went through my divorce, I actually found it helpful to have had such a good example from my parents. So that was a big part for me. When I think of not being alone, I remember anytime I wasn't sure what to do going through the divorce process or in disagreements with my ex-wife or trying to figure out the holidays, whatever it was, my immediate question was, what would my dad have done? Because my dad wasn't perfect, but he was my hero. And I wrote an ebook about him a few years ago where I got to tell lots of stories about him because, again, I know he wasn't perfect, but for me, he was the answer to what do I do and then fill in the blank situation. And so when I was going through my divorce, I could ask myself, okay, what would dad have done here? What would dad have done here? What would dad have done here? And that proved a pretty good guideline. And that's something that I try to share in a lot of my blended family work. The other one, again, it just reminds me of how blessed I am, because after Dad passed away, I kept a lot of his stuff. I kept some of his tools, and I kept some of, personal items and books and whatnot. And there was one day a few years ago, I was getting ready to go to school, and I got up in the morning, and it was freezing cold outside. My car was iced over, and I thought, dang it, I don't have an ice scraper. And I remember Dad's toolbox had been sitting in my closet for about 6 years. And I went and opened his toolbox, and there's an ice scraper in the bottom of it, because I knew it was there because it had been there my whole life, and I had just seen it rummaging around for screwdrivers and stuff. And I went and I got it out, and I scraped my car, and I got to school on time. And I thought, my dad's been gone for 6 or 7 years. He's still watching out for me.
Mm-hmm.
And so I know that I'm not alone, and those two moments really come to mind when I think of that idea. And it's those kind of moments that I want to use to encourage other dads, because whether it's your biological dad or a stepdad or just a father figure, there are men in your world who are willing to help you and go out of their way to try to help you and guide you and take care of you. I was very blessed that even though my parents divorced, my dad was still very much involved in our lives. I know everybody doesn't have that, but there is someone in everyone's life who is willing to perform some of those roles if you will give them the opportunity. So that's what that means to me.
So Joel, and let's back up just a minute, because talking about divorce,
Mm-hmm.
and I know that's such an incredibly difficult thing, especially because I have friends of mine that have gone through it, and it's radically impacted their life. And so even just going through a divorce,
Mm-hmm.
and the feelings of failure and all the chaos and all the just the junk, right, that you start thinking about and walking through and all the mess, that I mean, that's a pretty tough ordeal in itself. The fact that you had a dad who had been through it and that you
Yeah.
knew you could reach out to, man, that's huge. Because that, if you think about, if you didn't have that dad,
Right.
then it's
Right.
like most of us guys were too prideful
Yeah.
reaching out to other guys to say, hey man, how did you
Right.
deal with this thing?
Yeah, and that was the thing, is my dad had passed away before I went through my divorce, but I had his example, and again, it was just a guiding question. What would Dad have done here? How would Dad have approached this? And how would he responded in this sort of situation? And again, it became a powerful guide for me. It was extremely helpful, and that's a lot of why I try to do what I do in terms of working with other blended families, is because just like you said, a lot of people don't have a good example. There are tons of bad examples of how to go through divorces. Those are easy to find. They're a dime a dozen. It's really hard to find a good example of what do you do when you're hurting so badly that you can't stand it, and yet you've still got kids to take care of, and you've got an ex that needs to be respected, and how do you do that well? And again, I felt like I'm very blessed because I had an example, and that's something that I try to pass on to others. And John, definitely, please, you mentioned you've been through a couple of divorces. I would love to hear. I'd love to hear your thoughts as well, and because I'm sure there's some wisdom that I can learn from you even.
Yeah, John, how did the divorce, was there a time in that you that's when it hit you, the same kind of crap, I'm all alone, I'm the only one dealing with this, that thing? How did that play out in your life?
Well, I think that it's much different than Joel's. I didn't have a dad. I didn't have anybody in my corner.
Mm.
I wasn't taught. I didn't know and I wrote down some notes. I didn't know what a good dad looked like, or even more importantly, or just as important, what a good son looks like. How am I to be a good son? I don't know what that looks like either. And so to go through this, back in my first marriage, it was, football jock and the cheerleader. I mean, that's what it was. And her brokenness, my brokenness. Now, back in those days, you never heard about this: wounds, brokenness. There was nothing. You throw dirt on it and move on. But the hiding, that was huge.
Because of that, John, because you didn't have anybody to go to, you just tried to man up, suck it up, and figure it out, and just or muscle through it, right?
Well, sure. I knew that my kids didn't ask for this, so I needed to be a good dad, and I did the best I could. But to cover up all my insufficiencies, or if you want to say, was control and anger. And that's what I was. I was angry, and like I tell so many men I deal with, how many times are we so angry? Yet if I had a gun to their head, they would have no idea why.
Yeah.
And you just don't have a clue. It ain't about the lawnmower not starting. There's something bigger. I don't have answers for this stuff. And and then so you hide it, and then the shame of your home, what I grew up in. I'll tell you a quick story. My buddy, one of my dear, he's still a good friend to this day. We grew up together. It was three of us, the three amigos, really. We didn't have dads. We learned to drink, chase girls, life. We learned life taught amongst ourselves. And it was probably maybe 15 years ago, 10 years ago maybe, that I shared it with my buddy of the things I went through in my home. He was at my home a lot. My dad was good at hiding it. And so am I going to tell my friend this? Who am I going to tell? My school teachers? My football coach? No, there's nobody to go to. And so he said, John, I didn't have no idea. I said, no, and nor would I ever tell you, because your friendship meant so much to me. I would never jeopardize that. I tell people I was like the Toby Keith song, how do you like me now? I wanted to be accepted so bad. And every place I went, I felt like a third wheel. And yet I was the life of the party. Parties didn't start till I got there, but yet I still felt alone.
So you were afraid to tell him because you thought he was a really good friend of yours, that if he really knew what was going on in your life and everything was he wouldn't want to have anything to do with it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Nobody knew. I mean, nobody knew how our poorness of our house, that was shame. No.
When in John, in reality, different now. That most likely he would have become even a better friend knowing some of the stuff you'd been through.
Absolutely. But who are you going to trust? I didn't grow up in a Christian home by any sense. You trust me. I knew at a very young age, very clear to me, you're on your own. You need to take care of you. Very, very young. I probably 8, 9 years old, where I knew if I get to get through this, and I'll get through it because I'm a doer, but I got to figure this out. And who's God? And then when I became a Christian, it took 20 years later to really trust him. Okay, he's God. He'll love all you guys, but I know me. He's got to love me because he's God. God's supposed to do that stuff, but I know he don't like me very much. He's not pleased with me. So I spent 20 years trying to please him and trying to please you. This would have been much different, this encouraging dads, 15 years ago than it is for me right now. Very, very different. I would have done this to get you guys' approval. And now I'm doing it because I don't need it. I'm good with God. I'm really good with his grace. And but
you've been humbled.
Absolutely. I mean, it's so resting. It's just relaxing.
Yeah.
I went to a Bible college. I was a youth pastor twice. And then I felt like, I tell men when I'm speaking to men, I said, that old childhood game, red light, green light. That's how I felt in my whole life, especially with God. Okay, is he not looking? Okay, I can take steps. And as soon as he caught me, dang it, I got to start all over. Gosh, go back to the line. And that's 20 years. That's how I live my life. And so how can I teach my kids?
Yeah.
I mean, my kids are still paying for it. They're slowly coming back. But so
Kevin, how did it impact you, man, the idea of thinking you were all alone?
Well, I didn't have any brothers and sisters. So I was an only child. Never understood that when I was little. I always asked my mom why they just didn't go to the store and buy another brother or sister. I actually wanted a younger one so I could boss them around. That was the real honest truth. I grew up, I think what happened is it gave me a vivid imagination, which has kind of fueled the creative side. But I would gravitate toward people quickly. Of course, by doing that, sometimes I think you have a lot of what appear to be good relationships, but they're more just kind of artificial. You get to know people and you introduce them as my good friend, but then you don't even know their address and things like that. But it's hit me at different times. So, I think I've I've always been good at making friends, but how deep are the relationships? I mean, right now there's a good buddy of mine named Eddie, and we met when he moved to Raleigh to become the youth guy at the church we were at the time, and our families are like this, and he's probably the closest I have to a brother, where we'll hold each other accountable and things like that. It gets easier to share. But then, a couple of years ago, my position was eliminated at the TV station I was at. So I went from going to a workplace every day where there were hundreds of people and a team where there were a lot of us to just me working out of the home. And all of a sudden that becomes a whole different loneliness. I mean, my parents are still living. My dad and I have a good relationship. We went through rocky parts when I was a teen and I knew everything. Um, and it's interesting now to sometimes be the parent to him and, Dad, you need to be doing this and thinking about this. I don't think they still know what I do, but they're always supportive. But then you get into that. I mean, I've been extremely blessed by God with so much. But then, John said something that kind of spoke to me too about that life of the party type of thing. I'm probably more of an introvert, but I revert to the extrovert when I go places because I know, I enjoy people. But again, it's that surface thing sometimes. And so you leave thinking, I didn't really meet anybody. I didn't know anything. But and I think when that happens is people go, well, Kevin's got it all together and Kevin doesn't have a problem with that. And it's like, yeah, but you do, it's the imposter syndrome that kicks in. It's the, am I doing the right things? Am I pleasing God, type of thing. And so when you don't have that community and somebody to pull from, I think that's just where Satan just like, hey, thanks for having me here so I can mess with you.
So tell us too, Kevin, diving a little deeper, as a father of a special needs child, how did that also, I mean, because I can imagine you have a child with special needs,
Mm-hmm.
very moments where you and your wife, even as a couple, probably feel like you're all alone. But as a dad, how did that play out? And then how did you kind of overcome that?
Yeah, I mean, it's a whole different world that we are still trying to figure out. And he's 11. You quickly find out that there's a lot of folks that will, what's wrong with him? What's wrong with him? What's wrong with him? And then you have to get into all of that. But I think even not just Elias is his name, but even just not Elias, but with Ashlyn, our daughter, or Brandon, our oldest, it's always that, am I doing enough? I mean, look, I do believe you can be a parent and a friend. I've never believed in the you can't be a friend to your kids. Now, I think some parents want to be a friend first and a parent second, and I think that's when it gets out of whack. But I want Brandon to be my friend, and he is. We enjoy doing things, but he still sees me as his dad. But as far as the special needs thing, yeah, it's sometimes when you're in those moments where and he has to be completely taken care of, where you're like, so frustrating having to do this or whatever, and then you realize, okay, wait a minute, first of all, he still can do things, and he still even has gifts, even though he's has special needs and stuff like that, and there are other parents out there. And so when I think sometimes maybe from the special needs community is when you find someone else that has somebody with special needs in their life, there's an immediate connection. I mean, it's weird, but I think it's maybe the way we're wired when there's, things that we find that somebody else has a similar hobby or a like, or a lifestyle, or some about a family member that's been through something. It's like, oh, so I'm not the only one that is experiencing that. And then what do we do with it? I think that's the key right there.
Yeah. And I think too, like in my own story, I was in this isolated place. Satan was just wearing me out, convincing me I was all alone, only one struggling with it. But as I began to share my story, every single person I talked to had a father story.
Yeah.
And I was like blown away. And so I think a big part of what we're trying to all say here today, I think, without putting words in your mouth, is just being able to share part of who you are and your story and your testimony, because it's in that guys go, wow, you know, I'm not the only one struggling with alcohol or porn or, name your poison, right? What is it though? And somebody said something earlier about hiding,
Mhm.
and it's the shame and the guilt and all that. But how do we keep from hiding? What's the answer to that question, to the isolation piece, Joel? What do you think?
Well, I think that Kevin mentioned it really well. What he said reminded me of what C.S. Lewis says about friendship. He says, friendship begins the moment when you meet some other person and you say, "What, you too? I thought I was the only one." And that's a big part of it, is just being willing to uh, be vulnerable and put your, I know that word gets tossed around a whole lot, especially in business circles these days. But it really is a question of, who are you willing to open yourself up to? Are you willing to take a risk, like John was talking about earlier? Like, it's not something that people encourage guys to do, in terms of being open with other guys and asking for help. And so you've got to ask yourself, who do you trust? Who are you willing to take a chance on, knowing that you may get burned, but also knowing that if it goes well, this could be a life-altering thing. Close friendships, and we've all got people in our lives we look to. He's like, again, like John was describing, he's got this buddy that he grew up with, and they're pretty good friends. And I've got a guy like that, David. He and I've been buddies since we were 5 years old. We've been hanging out for over 3 decades now. And he was in both of my weddings, and I got to be in his wedding a couple years ago. And we've known each other for years, and my kids call him Uncle David, and I'm thankful for that. But I don't have a whole lot of other close guy friends, because it's not one where I feel comfortable opening up and telling all of my story to a lot of other people. And so it's a question of, who are you going to be willing to do that with, and are you going to be willing to accept the consequences if it doesn't go well? Or how are you going to vet those people so you don't open up to the wrong person?
I was going to say, so it really comes down to, it's a trust issue, and man, are they going to use this against me somehow, right?
Even
To
unintentionally. But yeah, it's definitely something to, because everybody's got skeletons in their closet. We've all done things we're not proud of. And again, it's just a question of, how vulnerable are you going to be, and at what time and in what way? And are those things going to come back to bite me in the rear end? Or is it something that's going to build a friendship?
And if I can jump on that too, that I'm a huge. I love using social media, and I think we're living in a world now where it's. Us connecting here in our different parts of the world would have been so much harder,
Mm-hmm.
years ago. But I think because of the illusion that social media puts out there, the perfectness and everything, advertising, everything is just so right, that when there seems to be somebody, like a pastor has something major happens, and it becomes national news, and then even sometimes the believers are like, well, I can't believe that would
Right.
happen. And it's like, wait a minute. Wait a minute.
he's just a man like
Right.
us.
Just a man.
Right?
We're all broken, and we're all messed up, and we all need the same grace.
Right.
And so I think that adds to it too, because we look at, it's easy for the world to say, this is perfection. This is what it is. This is what it looks like. And this is what you need to measure up to. And then we go, yeah, I don't know.
It's almost like a Facebook syndrome. And I heard this years ago, where people, it's their highlight reels, and you have this massive group that are of depression, because they get on there and they see everybody else's great life and think, wow, my life sucks, when not realizing that everybody else's life has trouble and issues and stuff too, right? In the isolation piece, if we look at this, we really talk about it as men, the isolation piece, it is the absolute worst place we can be as men, because when Satan gets us isolated, dude, he absolutely will do a number on us. And one of the stories, John Eldridge, when we interviewed him for the movie, he said, if you look at most men, and I think he may have said all men don't have really good friends. friends that know all their junk, all their stuff, the deepest, darkest secrets. And somehow we've got to get to that place where we're not afraid to have those
Mm-hmm.
conversations. So if nothing else, for accountability, man, if I'm fixing to go to a bar and my deal is alcohol and I'm fixing to walk in a bar, I need to call somebody to go, bro, talk me off the ledge. John, why is it you think, and you were that guy too, and all the struggles that you had previous, why is it that I think in some cases, man, we love living in isolation, in the darkness, thinking that light's never going to be shown on our stuff?
Well, I think that for me, and I want to say that I love hearing you guys, your stories. I just love it. But we all got a different journey. We all have it's different, and that's good because we're going to be able to talk to different men. But for me, it was a big trust issue. Trust was huge. And so for me, I had to get an identity. Identity is the thing that the enemy just wants to take away from us. We're not just a child of God, we're a beloved child of God. That's what the enemy left out when Jesus was in the desert. Oh, if you are the child of God, if you're the son of God. But he previously, right before that, he says, this is my beloved son. And we've got to rest in that. And so my identity was huge. It was gigantic. And so as I began to, I sound like a broken record to my guys because I go to 2 Peter 1:1-4 all the time. We get 5 blessings in 4 verses, 5 blessings that we get through the knowledge of Jesus. Salvation, we get peace and grace and abundance. We get the knowledge of know how to walk a godly life. We get to know his great and wonderful promises, and we get to know that we're in partnership with Jesus. And that is good stuff. And so I had to get to know God. And man, I teach this a lot. Get to know, is there a God, is reasonable, and then rest in that. And when I could do that, my identity, my identity is pretty solid because it's who God says I am, not who I say I am or other people. And so as I do that, now I don't open up, but I am recently I've shared some things with guys that I've never shared ever in my life. But
here are the top search results.
There's sorry about that. But our identity, my identity and it was huge. And so when I could get that stable, I could go to other people and understand what they're going through. Now, when you grow up in a kind of a healthy home, your identity is pretty established as a son. But if it's not, it's not. And that's who I deal with mostly, is men that are broken, rough, ugly, just rough guys. That's where my heart's at. I just had a chat with one of my guys this morning that I got to baptize about 4 years ago, and he's still doing really well. And he'd never been in a church before in his life. But those are the things we have got to get that squared away. Who are we? And once we get that, then we got to believe the promises of God, his great and wonderful promises. I do have what it takes. I am a warrior. I can do this. But not on my own strength that I've done for 40 years.
And you know what, dude, I love what you said. And so Joel and Kevin both, and asking you the question, because I do think that's key. And that comes with age too. I think, John, even you'd probably admit, it's like you get to a certain point in your life and you're like, man, I don't give a rip about what anybody else thinks. I'm going to do my thing. And there's a security in your relationship with God as maturity comes, right?
Right.
Not that there's not some young guys that have a solid faith and relationship, but I think it's just part of that. Joel, is that the struggle at some point or another that you've had in your life, is really being comfortable with your own identity and then knowing that it doesn't really matter what other guys think?
Absolutely. It's funny that you mentioned that, because that's something that I've shared with people from the stage before. Is one of the big issues that I had was just insecurity. You can't tell because I'm sitting down. I'm only about 5'3.5", so the Napoleon complex is very real with me. My older brother's much taller. My dad was much taller. My best friend David's about 6'5". And so, my whole life, I just struggled with this thing where I had to prove myself to everybody. So I had to have the best grades, and I had to be the best athlete, and I had to be the funniest guy in the classroom, and whatever it was, like I was just constantly in competition. And that was my identity, was having to be the best at everything. And if I wasn't going to be the best, I wasn't going to go down there. I wasn't going to go talk with those people. I wasn't going to spend time in that arena because it made me feel vulnerable. It made me feel insecure. And what, ironically, what made me finally get over that was going through my divorce. I went through divorce. I went through a job change. I lost my house through foreclosure. I went through bankruptcy. I lost custody of my kids, and everything I'd ever taken pride in was gone. And in that moment, I realized, okay, well, what God's trying to do here is get my attention. That what I should have been putting my identity in was not in my teaching or my coaching or my previous athletic skill from when I was younger. It shouldn't have been in my wife or my kids. It should what my identity should have been and was in Christ. And so when I went through my divorce, I finally just realized I'm not worried about anybody else's opinions anymore. I'm not trying to prove myself to anybody. I'm not trying to compete with anybody. That's not what it's about. What it's about is what John mentioned, which is just being secure in our knowledge that we are beloved children of God. If that's the case, no offense to anybody else, but nobody else's opinion matters that much to me. And to be fair, when I first went through my divorce, I had the view that nobody else's opinion matters, but it wasn't in a healthy way. It was I just don't give a crap what anybody thinks. And then I came to realize that's good, but in a different way. The reason I don't give a crap is not because you people don't matter. It's even though you do matter, the reason your opinion of me isn't going to bother me is because ultimately I'm not here to please you. Right? I'm looking for 2 words from God. I'm looking for well done. Yeah. And everything else is secondary. If I do that, nobody's opinion matters. And I mean that respectfully, whereas 10 years ago, what I would have meant that in a, sort of a middle finger to everybody. Like, I just don't care what you think. And I've grown, and I'm very glad because God taught me it's good that you don't care what they think, but that's not the way to go about it. You know what I mean?
Absolutely, dude. I love it. Kevin, how did it play out in your life?
I think there's periods of times where you do think about, what people are thinking. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, one of my absolute favorite verses, it's on a sign up here, is Ephesians 2:10, is that you are a masterpiece made by God with purpose. That's the short version of it, right? And he doesn't make messed up masterpieces. And he doesn't make something that, could be you're a masterpiece. And so when you start thinking about that, and look, I'm not going to act like I don't ever have days at all. But when you can keep thinking about that, it's like, somebody said before, not me, God don't make junk. And it's easy, I think, to look at somebody else and say, well, and, part of what I do is I put content out there, and I learned a long time ago, based on working in TV station and promotion and marketing, that, it was kind of art, but everybody had an opinion. Everybody had an opinion. But I realized there were differences, though. The story I always share is that years and years and years and years and years ago, I was dating this girl, and we were driving down the road. There was this church with this gigantic, huge steeple. And we look at it, and as she says, wow, that's beautiful, I immediately think, but if that thing fell, it'd go across the, and the trucks would have to go over it. We see the same thing. We think completely different.
Yep.
And so in reality, God sees us as the masterpiece in the heart. Somebody else may see me and go, dude, I don't like you. I had guys at church going, you need to tuck your shirt in, or you need to stop wearing the earring.
You need to cut that hair of yours, Kevin. I tell you what.
Thanks. Next time we do this, I'll have a fan blowing. But
nice.
Part of it is like, there is a point, and maybe it comes with age. I don't know. There wasn't a defining moment where, now I'm comfortable with myself. But I think it's when you can get to a point where I'm not really worried about pleasing other people. Mm-hmm. It's easier to share anything. And I think sometimes that's probably inhibited, sharing Jesus, because it's like, well, I don't want to put somebody off, and I don't want to say this. And so it's the wrong voice I'm listening to, as opposed to just putting it out there and being you. Hey, and I want to throw something out too, that maybe, I don't, John or Joe, somebody said something that, I don't go to that many men events. We had one at our church earlier in the year, and it was phenomenal, packed room. There's a local guy here that used to be an NFL player, and he gave it all up. Gave it all up, now runs a nonprofit farm. It's a phenomenal story. In fact, we probably ought to get him on here. But, when you're in that high moment with like 200 other guys, and we all take the pledge, and we're going to connect, and we're going to do this, and we sign the card, and then we walk out to our truck and we drive home by ourselves. And I think those moments are good, but sometimes I think we get so, I used to go to Promise Keepers when it would be a stadium, but it's like the days after and the weeks after. And that's why I think this encouraging dad and the community building smaller and connecting this way can be even more powerful, because once we get out of that setting, it's like, yeah, okay, does it really matter? Does it, the guys even I was sitting at the table with, we're probably not connecting after this. And I think that's the tough thing, and I think that keeps it sometimes from being real. That's my gut.
No, and I think too, it does ultimately, we mentioned this a while ago about pride, right? We're so prideful, and the struggle with pride in knowing or thinking that people aren't going to like us if they know the real us, in knowing dang well that they're struggling with the same stuff we are. Right? It's like, we're all men. We all struggle with the same stuff ultimately. And it's like, how do we get past that? And I think, and this has been, man, I love the lesson of identity, because it is, God humbled me like he humbled John Ball, and like he humbled Joel and you, Kevin, and just how he has this gift of making us realize that we really are a beloved child of him, no matter what we think and the attack that we get from the enemy. It's, man, ultimately, dude, he loves us more than we can ever imagine, right?
Hey, John, can I say something right here?
Yeah.
When I'm doing my men stuff, I can see the countenance on their face right off the bat. I start teaching them, assuring them that they do have what it takes. They can do this. And when I can look over, when I do my studies, it's no more than 8 guys. I'm starting another one in February. They're guys that are rough guys, just like I said before. But when I start just encouraging them that they have what it takes, they can do this. This can be taught. And when I start sharing my life with them, that I was there, what I can almost tell the first couple meetings we have, the ones that they're starting to get it, their countenance changes. I believe every man, I've talked to some rough guys. If I could sit down, and you could pick them, I didn't care. Pick me 10 guys to sit down with. And if I could spend time with them, I guarantee 7 out of those 10 are desiring a hope. They just don't believe it's there. So we go into our identity of protecting ourselves. And when we go through that we've got to get past that. And how can we trust God when he's a father? For me, that didn't work out all that good the first time. So how is this going to work out the second time? And so to get to know him and get to know and to let that rest in what he says. I am a warrior. I can do this through his power, and through trusting him, I can do this. And you can see the countenance on their face changing. But that's got to sink in. They've got to know that first.
And I think to that point too, John, the reality, and Joel, you can chime in here. The reality is that some of this stuff we're going to struggle with, even over and beyond present day. It's like, I still, because of my father's story and all the stuff I have, my junk, right? I still struggle with unworthiness and shame and all of those things. And that's even, more so a reason that we need guys that we can reach out to when we're on the cliff and we're fixing to jump off or whatever. True? Is that true, Joel?
Yeah, I think so. And what it reminds me of actually is one of my favorite verses that my soccer coach had us memorize in high school. Again, this is at a time when my identity was very much wrapped up in my athletic ability and that sort of thing. And I was a captain on the team, and I got suspended for a month because of grades. I chose not to turn in an assignment, and my grade bombed, and it happened the day before progress reports came out. So for a month, as a captain, I've got to sit on the bench. I've got to be a water boy. And that was really, again, for a 15, 16-year-old kid, that was a really hard thing. And that week, our coach just happened to have us memorize 2 Corinthians 4, 7 through 9. And the part that really stuck with me is where he says, we are hard pressed on every side, but not crushed, perplexed, but not in despair, persecuted, but not forsaken, struck down, but not destroyed. Right. And that's the part that hit home with me, because I thought, yes, that's where I'm at. And at that time, that was like the hardest thing I'd been through since my parents' divorce. Now I would kill for a day like that to be the hardest thing I'd ever been through. Having to sit down at the soccer game, like, boy, that was real tough. But, it's one of those where years later, when I'm going through divorce, or when I'm going through job loss or job change things, when I'm going through foreclosure, when I'm dealing with, now I've got two teenage daughters, and when we're having a hard day, I remember that verse. That, okay, right now I am perplexed, but there's no reason to despair, right?
Amen.
Because I know that ultimately God is in control, and things will work out the way they are supposed to if I'm doing what God wants me to do, right? So that's my task. Again, my ultimate goal is I want to hear well done, and everything else is a way to get to that. It's a process by which that is the ultimate goal. And so I need to be fathering in that way. I need to be husbanding in that way. I need to be teaching and coaching. And I need to make sure that what I'm doing is remembering that whatever's going on, what I'm here to do is to share the gospel faithfully with other people. And if I do those things, then we'll be good.
You mentioned this too a while ago, Joel, and I think it's so important in being able to connect with other men and build get that 1, 2, 3 guys around us that we can call when we are just in the midst of attack and struggling with whatever, the discernment piece, right? Because it is, and I get that. It's the prayerful discernment of God lead for those guys that may not have that one guy that they can, reach out to. God, just lead this one man, 2, 3 guys across my path that I can trust in, and I can build a real relationship. Because most of us, if we admit, most of our, and Kevin said this, we're kind of on this superficial, hey, how you doing? Oh, I'm good. It's the church thing. It's, you ask a guy how he's doing, it's, oh, I'm good. When he just argued with his wife and his kids and everything else on the way to church, and he's pissed and blah, blah, blah. But how is it, and I'll ask each one of you as we kind of wrap up here, how is it we get past this idea of you're not alone? If a guy comes to you and says, man, I'm struggling with this concept, I feel like I'm all alone, what piece of advice would you give him, Kevin?
Oh, I was afraid you were going to start with me.
Yeah, thanks for that, by the way.
Yeah. I don't know. I don't think just be real is advice. Just get over it. I have problem drinking. Well, just stop drinking. Well,
right. That's great. Thanks.
Yeah. Thanks a lot. How much do I owe you?
I wish I had thought of that myself.
I think it's being willing to be around others. I can't help someone as much as I may want to who is unwilling to help themselves. I can send them books, I can take them places, but at some point they've got to be willing to do that. I mean, praying constantly for that person and realizing that they have to feel something for it. So, I don't know that I would have a really good answer for that, other than just, I was in a group once, and there was one guy in there that was just adamant that, we've got to get to know each other, and we've got to share. We've got to build this intimacy. And it was almost like dictating it. And I think when it's done that way, there's going to be fewer buying in. It's like, I shouldn't go out of the house naked, that one I can check off the box. But to say to a group of guys, probably anybody, hey, everybody's got to share and be vulnerable in here, you know, so you go first. I don't know that's going to do it, as opposed to being willing to take the first step ourselves, so people can see that and putting it out there, and maybe starting with smaller stuff, because I think trust is a major thing.
You know what, dude? And I love that, because I think even in my relationships with guys, the ones that I've wanted to go deeper with and really give an effort, it's just the text. Hey, bro, I'm thinking about you, praying for you, man. It's, hey, let's go grab coffee. It's the little stuff that I think we so often overlook. That, man, it's just, hey, a simple text, I'm praying for you, bro. Hope you're having a good day. Whatever. And I've had guys kind of get freaked out by that before. But it's at the same time, it's like, bro, man, that's what being a brother's all about, right? This band of brothers. Let's talk, let's have these conversations. But it's the really the effort. And I agree, Kevin, when you try to force it, oh my gosh, dude, you can't. Yeah,
It just doesn't work.
It goes the opposite way. Yeah. John, what do you think, man, if you're giving one guy one piece of advice?
Well, I think that building that, I'm getting my phone here because I want to, I do this. You got to build that relationship. Trust is everything. They've got to trust you, and they've got to trust God. I send rather text or call multiple times a day to my guys, and I think they receive it well. This is what he wrote back to me. I gave him a verse to look up. I'll take a look at it. Thanks for always being there for me. And I did one to a guy yesterday, sent one, just encouraging verse. His wife's got cancer. And guy, we can be that tough, rough guy that, we don't want to get emotional. We don't want to get feely, but I don't think that's all that true. Once they know they can trust you and you're sincere, I think that's it. But we got to understand that this group right here, Encouraging Dad, is unique. Okay, you're not getting this in the church. You're going to get please God and don't trust God. And outwardly or subliminally, that's what's taught. We need to please God. And that's not going to work. I had a chat with, I think I shared this before, John, I'm not sure, but I had a chat with a gal I knew there was something more, and I was talking with her, and she just finally broke down. She says, listen, my friend was raped, and she was pregnant, and she had an abortion. Now, if she's going to go to hell for having an abortion, I'll go with her. And I said, oh, you are missing God. You are missing God completely. It's not your sins. It's who you're going to choose. That sin stuff will take care of itself down the road. And that's where we just got to go. My guys, I want them to know that they're accepted just in the junk and muck that we're in, that God can't love us anymore in our best time, or love us less in our worst time. And once we do that, and I think Encouraging Dad's going to do this, and it can, but you're not getting it in the church, John. Not my church or any churches I know around here. You're not. And so I think it's sincerity to build that relationship and be honest about it. Don't go in there as a here's my 3-point ways of how to get right with God. But I'm a hunting fishing guy. We're going to get a lot done in my boat and drive my truck chasing dogs. Okay, we're chasing hounds up in the hills. We're getting to God. I don't know how. That's his department. But we're going to get there. I know we will. But they're going to know at the end of the day that I'm in the boat with them. And that's what Jesus did. He got in the boat with them. He didn't, and that's what we got to do. We got to get into with them and remember and what I've learned, you couldn't accuse me of this 15, 20 years ago, but compassion is huge for me. Compassion. What did a mile in his moccasins look like? That's how I think forgiveness, we haven't talked about, is gigantic. When I forgave my dad, I knew that it finally, I did. And I've been in counseling. Oh my goodness gracious. I could tell we could do a whole hour deal on just that. But when I forgave my dad, and it just hit me, this was before any of my healing started even, but God was involved in this. And I was on the phone with my dad, and it just hit me. It overwhelmed me. And I know it was God. And I said, Dad, I don't know what you went through growing up that caused you to be the monster that you were, but I'm sorry. I am so sorry you went through whatever you went through. And I said, I'm not holding this against you anymore, Dad. I love you. And it was like a million pounds. And I get emotional right now thinking about that, because that was huge for me. And that was a turning point. My brother and sister, I don't think have got there yet. And that breaks my heart.
The compassion piece, John, is what, dude, that is so huge, because I think if all of us walked in that compassion and humility
Absolutely.
and awareness of man, that lady is angry, but there's a reason why she's
Absolutely.
angry,
Absolutely.
right? It's the hurt people hurt people.
Yeah.
Joe, what do you think? What kind of advice would you give a guy?
Well, I love what I've heard from Kevin and John, and I kind of want to build on both of those. Not long ago, I was blessed at our high school. Mike Lutzenkirchen came to speak there. If you guys don't know Mike, he is Philip Lutzenkirchen's dad. Philip was a football player at Auburn a few years ago, like 6 or 8 years ago now, and he died in a car wreck not long after graduation. And Mike started a group called the Lutzen, I think it's called Lutzy 43 Foundation. That's for his son. And he came and spoke at our high school, and he mentioned that he found out that his son had made such a huge impression on people, both before he passed away and afterward. And he said, if you can think in one word what it was that caused Philip to have such an impact on people, what is it? And you know, he says he does this all the time, and very rarely do people get it. So Mike, if you ever listen to this, forgive me for giving away the answer to this question. But he said what it is that made such a huge impact on other people was Philip's ability and willingness to be available.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And so Kevin kind of touched on that, and John kind of touched on that. What we need to do as men is, if someone comes to us and says, I don't know what I feel stuck, or I'm not sure what I'm supposed to do. So we need to be willing to be the ones to say, let's sit down and talk about it. Tell me more.
Yeah.
Right. Because that's the compassion, that's the humility, that's the empathy, all wrapped up into one, where you just look at it and you go, okay, if this guy's if he's taking the risk to reach out to me, I need to be willing to say, thank you. Please tell me more. Let's see what I can do to help. Even if all I can do is lend a listening ear, that's huge. That's a huge place to start, because that's how we start building trust. So if you're looking for somebody to reach out to, obviously I think anybody in the Encouraging Dads group, please reach out to us. I know we'd love to chat with you. But for us, when someone comes to us and says, hey, I'm not sure what to do, or I've got this big issue and great, let's go get coffee. And let's sit down and let's chat about it. And let me just listen, and then I can know better. If nothing else, I will know more specifically how to pray for you. Right? And so being available is a huge part of getting past that I feel all alone, because that way we can be the ones to start reaching out or listening when other people reach out to us. I think that's a huge, huge part of it. Like I said, Kevin and John touched on that, and I love that. That's what it made me think of.
I think the challenge too for those, and my oldest daughter's kind of an introvert. And this is something we've walked through with her through the last few years. It's challenging her to reach out to others. And as guys, that we've mentioned it many times, the pride factor. We don't want to admit we need help, or we have a struggle or issue or whatever, because somehow it makes us look less of a man, or whatever the myth and lie that we tend to believe is. But the challenge to those that are all alone, or that feel they're all alone and isolated, it's prayerfully discernment, reaching out, trusting God that he's going to connect you with some man that's going to help you kind of walk through this journey, and for me, I love the idea in a lot of cases of reaching out to an older man who's been there and done that, right? He's
absolutely,
as a friend has said, he's paid all the dumb tax. And so he, I don't have to pay the dumb tax or as much of it. I'm still going to pay it probably, knowing me, but it's the challenge of even that. And ultimately, guys, I think prayerfully, and all of us would agree, we want this Encouraging Dads community, even though it's digital or mostly digital. Eventually, it will be geographical, hopefully, where we can do men's meetings on a local level. But this is what we're talking about today. This is why we have this group, and the mission behind all of it is to help guys understand, man, brother, you are not alone, and you're not the only one struggling with it. It doesn't matter what it is. as a dad or a man or a husband. We've all been there, or we're there, or we're going to be there in one sense or another. So, John, you had something.
Well, I just wanted to add real quick. We need to be careful, and I'll tell you why. Of saying, and it's quick to say that we're prideful, and there's absolutely, I'm not denying that, but I can give you a handful of men that I've talked to. We've talked about pride. I back that down a little bit because it's trust. I've had guys literally mad at me in my group. Blanky, blank, blank. It's not that I'm prideful. Who am I going to go to? And so we got to be careful that just lumping them all into a pride thing. There's a lot of guys that just don't have anybody. Nobody. I was that guy. I would have loved to have somebody walk and kick me in the butt and say, hey, get on course. So we got to be careful of that. Not all guys are like that.
I hear you, bro. And I appreciate that. Yeah. Thanks for correcting me in the sense that, no. I used it in a general term, but dude, I totally agree. And I need you guys to hold me in check, bro. Because believe me, there's times where I tend to stray or say things I should.
We're all in a different journey. And the guys that God put in front of us are different. The guys that God put in front of me are probably different that they're going to put in front of you, no doubt.
Absolutely.
But, like I tell my guys, write in their book, don't let your wounds go to waste. Because what you went through, God's going to can use. And so don't let your wounds go to waste.
Dude, I love it. Guys, I appreciate you doing this today, man. And we look forward to doing the next roundtable.
Yep.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Enjoyed it, guys.
Yeah, me too.